Dear students, let us start the discussion today on 26th October 2016 newspaper. The first article is related to playing on geopolitical chessboard, and it is most related to the changing patterns of Indian diplomacy. And it is the article by M.K. Narayan. Here let us understand certain terminology which he has used. He spoke about multilateral diplomacy. It means that today the bilateral diplomacy is more giving away to the institutional multilateral diplomacy, where the engagement is more at the multinational level, such as growth of the SARC, BIMSTEC, BRICS, SCO, NAM, all these things, they represent the multilateral diplomacy. And there is a new dimension to this multilateral diplomacy, that is the trade dimension. The growth of transatlantic trade and investment partnership, trans-Pacific agreement, regional comprehensive economic partnership, all these are the multilateral diplomacy and its manifestations. So today is, the world is at the midst of the multilateral diplomacy. And the second is the transactional politics. Here we need to differentiate this from value based politics. The transactional politics focus more on so what is the economic advantage one country gets from the other, and how much of the trade can be improved rather than based on long term value based diplomacy. So the Nehruvian era, it is known for value based diplomacy, and the present Prime Minister Modi's era, the diplomacy is said to be more transactional in nature. And new long march. So the long march, it refers to the route taken up by the Mao and his followers, and before establishing their base to fight the government. So now Mr. Xi Jinping, he is taking this revisiting this route to claim his legitimacy over the government apparatus. That's what is being said. And China's peaceful rise, this is brought in by Hu Jintao. So the rise of the China is not a threat to any other country, and its rise is to create wealth for its people rather than unnecessarily interfering in the international affairs. So it has no interest in brokering the international peace or else involving in various matters that may threat to the or that may cause damage to its reputation. And the next is fourth generation industrial revolution. So it's a industrial revolution based on the confluence of the technologies, the coming togetherness of digital technologies, biological and physical technologies. So the driverless cars, all these are the symbols of fourth generation revolutions, which are said to be very much disruptive in nature, which may cause huge unemployment or change in the employment patterns in the world. So, in this context, let us see this article. Now, the nature of the diplomacy is changing, and more than bilateral diplomacy, it is becoming multilateral diplomacy. India is also interested to join these multilateral forums. By being insider, it believes that it can influence the diplomatic outcomes better. For example, if you see the entry of India, the exercise of India to enter into NSG, that's a clear example. Entry of India with regard to Wassenaar agreement and missile technology control regimes, all these are to gain the greater legitimacy with regard to the diplomacy. And in these circumstances, certain multilateral forums are fading away and certain new forums are gaining their importance. Especially during Nehruvian era, the NAM was pioneered as a forum to protect the strategic autonomy of newly independent nations. But today, NAM appears to be irrelevant. The reason is the nature of the diplomacy has shifted from value based to the transactional in nature. But however, the author argues that NAM still has its relevance because the not so peaceful rise of China and the new assertiveness of China under the leadership of Xi Jinping is not only a threat to India but also many other countries. You can see the South China Sea argument recently. So, in this context, NAM can be a forum where the sovereignty of the countries can be asserted against the not so peaceful rise of China. And the second thing is the SARC. So the SARC is a multilateral forum where the idea was mooted by India itself. But Pakistan is a major obstructionist in the movement of SARC connectivity and also South Asian Free Trade Agreement. So in this context, India is an undisputed leader in the SARC, But the Pakistan obstructionist attitude made India to move for the alternative forums such as BIMSTEC and BCIM, all these things. So, in this context, it has been clearly said that if you see the influence of China, China's influence is much higher in BIMSTEC compared to the SARC. China is the undisputed trade partner of all the countries in the BIMSTEC. So in this, India, if it has to retain its leadership position in South Asia, so it has to make the SAARC to live. And the next perspective of this is the changing dimensions of the relationships. If you see the BRICS, so the three major economies today are India, Russia, and China. On the other hand, Brazil and South Africa, they are slowly losing out in BRICS as strong emerging economies due to fall in the commodity prices. In this context, there is a convergence and a strategic agreement between Russia and China. So it makes India naturally disadvantageous. On the other hand, India is moving close to United States of America, and Russia also appeared close, moving or initiating or broadening its engagement with Pakistan. So, in this scenario, this realignment, how India has to balance, how India has to protect its interests with Russia, and also has to gain from the economic might of the United States of America. So, in case of Russia, India is no more a strategic ally, it is a major trustful defense partner. So, that's how the relation has been changed to today. And in this scenario, India's diplomacy has unnecessarily focused only on one single agenda, that is cross border terrorism. So, India's diplomacy is getting more guided by the Pakistan and its actions. And in this scenario, so the author argues that the focus of India shall be on its strength, that is, the market and its economic might, and its human potential. So, the fourth generation industrial revolution, which we are talking about today, that India has a great potential to gain from because of its human resources, and India has to tap its strength from this. Now, coming to dealing with Maoists. So, let us talk about this article. Now, the tribal belts, especially the mining areas where the displacements are high, there the the tribals' disengagement with the government and loss of interest and also trust on the government has led to the occupancy of this gap or space by the Maoists. But Maoists, rather than focusing on political reform, focusing on empowerment of these tribals, have taken to the militarism. This has led to the declaration of Maoists as the greatest threat to the internal security and strengthening of the fight against them by the state. So you can see the Cobra forces and greyhounds in Andhra Pradesh and also similar kind of forces in the other states is a manifestation of this internal war. So, in such a situation, the recent encounter across Andhra Pradesh and Orissa border shows the worst side of this particular violence. So, the human rights violations are the major objections against the state. The state has given a dual policy to fight the Naxalism. One is to take the development to the regions of the tribal people and to provide for the armed forces the greater power to fight the Maoists. So, the Prime Minister words yesterday has clearly stated that in the name of the mining and development, occupying the land of the tribals cannot be allowed for. So, this approach that will give or throw away the Naxalism rather than the taking to the arms. So, that is what is the centrality of this particular article. And Samajwadi meltdown, it is more of politics, which I am not interested to deal with. Now, coming to Wallonia, a challenge called Wallonia. It is about free trade agreements. Now, between Canada and European Union, a comprehensive economic trade agreement was signed, and it is supposed to be signed and finalized. And almost after 5 years of negotiations, it has come forward. The major criticism about that is it was the negotiations were conducted in a non-transparent manner and the stakeholders were not involved. So in this context, European Union came with a proposal that so the CETA will be finalized only when 28 countries agree for the same. 28 members of the European Union agree for the same. So here, Wallonia, it is a French dominant region of Belgium. So Belgium has Dutch speaking people and French speaking people. So it's a French dominant region. So if a country has to ratify any agreement, all the regional assemblies has to pass that in Belgium. This Wallonia region, it is not willing to pass the CETA, and it means that Belgium cannot pass the CETA. And the CETA will come into force only when 28 countries agree to the same. Now, 27 countries are ready to agree, but Belgium cannot agree to that unless Wallonians agree to the same. So, here, what are the objections of the Wallonians? So, Wallonians say that there are three things. One is the judiciary is strong in the Europe. What is the need for separate investor courts? And the second is state investor disputes. According to the European Union citizens and civil society groups, it will provide for the big business a greater advantage to sue the governments. And in these circumstances, the state and investor dispute settlements will go against the interests of the labor and the sovereignty rights of the states. And third thing is, so the question of sovereignty, the European Union, European Parliament, Commission, etc., they are imposing their mandate over these particular the independent sovereign states. That is what is the crux of Brexit too. And what are its implications to India? Now, India-European Free Trade Agreement is in the freezer from very long. And UK-India Free Trade Agreement is most discussed about. So, in the light of Brexit, so it is going to create a worst impact on the Indian corporate sector, especially this particular CETA agreement will show that the Brexit argument between UK and European Union is not going to be a smooth affair. And as European Union market is curtailed to the UK, then the corporate sector, which is mostly placed in UK, is going to face the much turbulence. Now, coming to the power of Bollywood, it talks about soft power of movie cinema. So, India is able to gain its influence in West Asia and South Asia, majorly due to the power of the Bollywood. So, we don't need to go much beyond that in this article. Now, coming to the ease of doing business index. Now, India has improved by one position and reached to 130th position in the ease of doing business index. The major things which made change for India is the provision of the electricity connections, ease of application or paying the taxes, and then providing for commercial courts where enforcement of contracts becomes much easier. So these are the three things which made India to improve its ranks. So another thing is there is a new calculation which has been brought into, that is what is called as distance from frontier. So what is this distance to frontier? It means what is the best performing nation on a particular thing and where do we stand. So it shows how much we have improved. India has improved from 53 to 55 in this particular area. And the next is the gender gaps persist. World Economic Forum, it gives a report called as a gender gap report. It calculates the four broad dimensions of gender equality. One is economic participation, education, health, and politics. If you see the politics, the gender participation is very high in India thanks to the Panchayati Raj institutions. But on the education also recently the enrollment rates of girl children has increased. But on the economic participation front, there are still many glass barriers. And onto the health and sanitation front also the gender gaps exist in India. Now coming to Hindutva verdict. The Supreme Court of India in Ramesh Prabhu versus Prabhakar Kunte case in 1995 declared that Hindutva refers to a way of life rather than referring it to a particular religion. So in this context, recently the section 123 of the Representation of Peoples Act is in discussion. So this deals with use of religion with regard to the elections. So any reference to the religion in the elections and use it for the electoral gains to or ask for the votes based on the religion is considered as electoral corrupt practice. So in this context, a case is pending before the court that using the saints in the religion, saints and saints asking for the votes from the people, is that not violation of the section 123 of the Representation of Peoples Act? So under this context, The question of Hindutva, word Hindutva also need to be revised. That's what has been asked to the Supreme Court. Now, let's go to the Pakistani Academy, the militant attack. I don't want to talk about all these events. So, what it can be clearly said is a country that is perpetuating terrorism will also become a victim of terrorism. So, the Pakistan shall understand in a quick succession that the terrorism, the seeds of terrorism which it is going to sow, is becoming a Frankenstein monster which is going to eat away the master. So these are the articles for today. Thank you very much and all the best. And from today we are reviving the notes too. So I'm planning to give the notes by evening 8 o'clock on this particular topic, and it will be posted on civilsprep.com, or it will be posted on lax.in/civilsprep. Thank you very much and all the best. Because early in the morning for preparing the video, it is taking around 2 hours. And again, preparing the notes, it is I'm unable to balance the time because I have the classes and I need to prepare for the classes too. So that's the reason why I'm planning to give the notes in the evening, and from today I'm going to revive this particular thing in the evening. So thank you very much and all the best.